All right, sixth graders. So today we're going to begin talking about how to read music. So your substitute is going to give you a double-sided piece of what we call staff paper. Okay, and this is what we use to write music on. Right? The staff is the group of 5 lines. We're going to label that in just a second. Really important first step: label your name at the top of your page, first and last name. And then if you're in the first sixth grade class, if you're in the flute and clarinet class, you're going to label it as 6A. If you're in the brass class, the trumpet and trombone class, you're going to label it as 6B. So 6A is first elective, 6B is second elective. Okay? At the end of class, you will need to turn this into the substitute, and I'm going to be checking to see that you've completed all that we're doing in this video together. Right? So this is going to be what we use throughout the year. We'll add some pieces of paper to our binder. That's why it's hole punched. Okay, once everyone gets their binder, we'll put this in there, and it will kind of be an ongoing project of our music writing, or sometimes we call it music theory. Right? So let's start with the basics. Some of you may know this already, which is awesome. Okay, we're going to label these 5 lines. This is called the staff. So circle part of that, and we're going to call it the staff. This is what we use to write music on. So each of these lines, and in between the lines and the spaces, that's where we're going to write our notes. Now, at any point during this video, you can pause to catch up with me, or if you need a little bit more time to label this stuff, just pause it and jump right back in as you're doing that, because I'm going to move kind of fast, right? The next thing we need to know is going to be our musical alphabet. So I want you to go ahead and write musical alphabet. Equals. And then when we're using letters in music, we always use capital letters. So label these capital A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Stop at G. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters that we use in music. Easy. When we get to G, we restart, we go back to A. Draw a line, an arrow like that, from the last note to the first note. So we read forward, it continues. It's kind of a loop. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Loops around over and over again, and we'll see how that works on the actual music itself in a second. Okay? Cool. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to learn about the different types of clefs. Okay? So the first thing on the next line, the next staff that you have on your page, we're going to label a treble clef. So let's label that first. Okay? So treble clef. This is also known as a G clef. So the way we're going to label it is as follows. You're going to start with a line that goes above the top line of a staff to below the bottom line of the staff. And then you're going to start on the top, okay, on the right side. And you're going to loop around like that. So again, we're going to draw a few of those in a row. Line that starts above the staff to a little bit below the staff. We're going to loop around to the right first. So you're starting at the top, go to the right, go to the left, and then loop around. When you're drawing this, you need to be careful that you're looping around with the second line. So if you notice, this part right here is kind of swirling around that second line. That's really going to help us to make sure that we understand how this clef is going to work. Let's draw 2 more of those. So 2 more treble clefs at your own pace. If you can do it in one motion, even better. And good if you can draw it the same. Mine don't even look the same. If you can draw yours, make it look the same, that is awesome. I cannot obviously do that. All right, so that's treble clef or G clef. A lot of the instruments are going to read in treble clef when they read music in your TOE book, so your Tradition of Excellence book. When we start reading music, the flutes, the clarinets, and the trumpets are going to read their notes in treble clef. Okay? But we have another clef that we use. So draw a little squiggly line in the middle. And then if you have room off to the side right here, okay, go ahead and label bass clef. Kind of looks like bass, but it's not a fish. So bass clef. If you don't have room here, you can draw it on the next line. And bass clef is also known as an F clef. This one's going to look a lot different. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find the bottom line, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth line of the staff. And you're just going to draw a dot on it. Next, you're going to swirl around to the right, just like we did for treble clef, and kind of make like a backwards C looking line. Then you're going to draw a dot on either side of that fourth line. Let's draw another one of those. So dot on the fourth line, swirl around, dot above, dot below. And 2 more of those at your own pace. Draw the dot first. The dot to the left helps you to kind of get it going. Dot above, dot below. When we write music, we want to make sure that our pencil is really sharp. So mechanical pencils are really good for this. But if you have a wooden pencil, just make sure you sharpen it. The pencil sharpener is on top of the bookshelf over to the left side of the front of the room. So sharpen it so you have a nice point so you can draw these, especially these dots, these small dots that we're doing, very precisely. Okay, so that's bass clef and F clef. Like we said, trombones are going to read using that clef in a lot of their music. Now, we're going to go to the next staff in our system. Let's draw a treble clef again. And my lead just broke. There we go. Draw another treble clef. Now this treble clef swirls around that note that we were talking about earlier. So what you're going to do is you're going to draw a circle and color it in on the second line. Don't draw your circle too big. You want to make sure it's definitely on the line and that it doesn't look like this. That's too big because I can't tell if it's on the line or if it's above that. So try not to draw anything like that. Now let's hope and pray that my eraser works. Sort of, kind of. Now we're going to draw some different notes. And this is going to kind of teach you how to read in treble clef. It's very, very simple. So just copy what I do. You're going to draw a circle without coloring it in on the bottom line, on the second line, third line, fourth, and fifth. And that's why you want to make sure you have a sharp pencil. Make sure none of your circles are too big that you can definitely tell they look like mine. They're exactly on the line. Okay? Now let's draw what we call a bar line. So a bar line is just going to go straight up and down between the top line and the bottom line. And we're going to label that bar line. Okay. On the right side of the bar line, we're going to kind of do opposite. We drew a circle on the lines. Now we're going to draw a circle in between the lines. We call this on the spaces. So in between the lines, and there's only 4. So there's 5 lines, but there's 4 spaces in between them. Now let's draw another bar line. So treble clef is also known as G clef, like we talked about. So this note right here is going to be a G. Complicated. Label that as a G. Remember, we're using capital letters when we label the notes. This note right here is also a G. Now for the rest of them, we're going to go to label them. I'm going to show you what they are first. So the first one, wow, that's working great. First one is an E. First line, we have the G after that, and then next is B, capital letters, D, and then F. Right? There's some sayings that go along with this, so if you want to flip your paper sideways, okay? Some sayings you can use are, every good boy deserves fudge, or every good boy does fine. Elvis's guitar broke down Friday. Every good burger deserves fries. Every good boat does float. Every good bird does fly. There's so many of them. So choose one that you think you're going to remember, and then we're going to kind of draw that diagonally from those letters. Remember, the first G we're not using. We're just starting with the E. So every good burger deserves fries. Whichever one you want to do. Every good bird does fly. Elvis's guitar broke down Friday. Use whatever it's going to help you memorize the most. One that's kind of catchy to you that's going to help you memorize. So we use the first letter of each of those words to figure out what those lines are. I always start at the bottom and then go up. Same thing for the spaces. I'm going to start at the bottom going up to the top one. Make sure yours look exactly like mine before you label these two. First one is F. Next one is A, C, and then E. What does that spell? Face. So we call these spaces, we call these lines. So notes that are on the lines, notes that are on the spaces. Face rhymes with space, so that's a pretty easy way. Always start from the bottom, work your way up. Every good burger deserves fries. F-A-C-E. Now, there are some notes that we have to read that go below and above the staff, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later. Let's go ahead and label our bass clef next. So, new staff. Draw your bass clef again. Dot first. Swirl around, backward C. 2 dots. The 2 dots are always going to go around the 4th line. And we're going to label, the first note we're going to label is actually going to be the note that comes from the F clef. So the 4th line, okay, go ahead and draw a dark circle kind of like we did on the treble clef. And that is the note F. That note is highlighted by this dot right here, by these 2 dots right here. It kind of points out this note. If we memorize that note as F, we can read all the notes in bass clef. If I memorize this note as G in treble clef, I can memorize all the notes in treble clef. 2 things to memorize, super, super easy. Let's go ahead and do the same thing we did with the lines and the spaces. So we're going to draw circles rather than coloring them in. Bottom line, second line, third line, 4th, and 5th. Pause if you need to. The first one, these are all going to be different than treble clef. We have to read the clefs differently. The first one is G, the bottom line. Next one is B, D, F, and then A. Draw a bar line, just so we can separate that. If you notice, I'm kind of skipping every other letter of the alphabet. I go from G, skip A, to B, skip C, to D, skip E, to F, skip G, back to A. Let's label the spaces now. Same way you did on the last one. So lines that, circles that go in between the lines. And we're going to label those as A, C, E, and G. Draw a bar line, finish that. So do the same thing, kind of tilt it sideways. We're not going to use the first F. We're going to start with G. One easy saying to use to memorize this is grizzly bears don't fly airplanes. So that kind of helps us out. Gravelly Hill Grizzlies, grizzly bears don't fly airplanes. Start at the bottom, work my way up. These notes are not the same. The bottom line is G in bass clef. The bottom line is not G in treble clef. They're offset a little bit. So we kind of have to memorize them separately. But like I said, if you memorize this note right here is G, and that note right there is F, you'll be in great shape. For the spaces, we were lucky with treble clef. It just spells the word face, rhymes with space. In bass clef, asug doesn't really spell anything. So we're going to come up with another saying. For this one, we have two options. First, we're going to say all cars eat gas. If you like that one, you can write that one down. If not, you can say all cows eat. Oh, I did that again. E-E-A-T. E-A-T. And then grass. Easy way to memorize it. Whichever one is best for you. You want to memorize the one that's catchy to you. So for me, I've always memorized grizzly bears don't fly airplanes, all cows eat grass, face, and every good burger deserves fries. If something else works for you, perfectly fine. If you want to come up with your own, make it catchy, make sure you're going to memorize it like that. Cool. Now, we're going to go ahead and go back to treble clef for a second. So draw another treble clef on your next line on staff paper. And we're going to label the notes line, space, line, space, line, space. We're going to kind of fill in the gaps. We're going to draw closed circles for these. So start on the bottom line and color in the circle. The first space, color it in. And then go forward from there. Line, space, line, space, line, space, and top line. Make sure yours looks exactly like this, that you're not skipping from one line to another line. You're going line, space, alternate that way. Also, make sure you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 notes drawn. If you don't, you're missing something. So we're going to use these sayings to help us. Remember, we're in treble clef right now, so we have to use these right here. We know this note is G. If we memorize that note, we pretty much know how to read everything else. If notes go up in music, these are going higher, you're going to go forward in the alphabet. So what comes after G is actually A. And then I'm going to keep going forward. This is a B, capital letters, C, D, E, and F. Now, if I go below G, I'm going to go backwards in the alphabet. So now I'm going lower. The notes are going down. So G to F, F to E. Do a double check to make sure that yours line up with what we did earlier. So E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and F. If they line up, you're in great shape. If they don't line up, you might want to adjust a little bit. Bass clef, let's do the same thing. So draw your bass clef. We'll do the same thing. Start on the bottom line, color in the bottom line. And then we'll alternate line, space, line, space, line, space. Make sure you have 9 total. This one is not going to start with E. It's actually going to start with the bottom line, which is G. So let's label that as a G. Another note that we know is the other name for bass clef, which is the F clef. And that's right there. We know that the 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth line is F. Let's go to fill in the gaps. So that's going to help us to make sure we're on track. I'm going up the notes are going up the staff. I'm going to go forward in the alphabet. After G is A. After A is B. Sing the song in your head if you need to. In your head. Nobody want to hear that out loud. I don't. All right, cool. So we have that. So really, really easy. We can just read it like a straight up alphabet. We never go to H. We never go to H in music. We're lucky. We just have those 7 letters. We start back from A, and that's how we read more notes. Now, this is a little confusing. On both treble and bass clef, we have 2 E's and 2 F's for treble, or 2 G's and 2 A's. So how are we going to know the difference? A lot of times when we go to play a note, we're either going to know it's a lower note or it's going to be a higher note. So we'll see that note written, and we have to kind of make that sound by changing our fingering sometimes, or sometimes we're going to change our mouth to make a different sound happen. So there is a possible, you're going to learn how to play multiple G's and A's and C's and F's on your instrument. You're going to learn how to play low ones and medium ones and high ones. So we'll get to more of those as we start playing our notes, okay? Now, sometimes I have to go below the staff. So let's start on our new line, our new staff treble clef. We know that the lowest note we know how to read so far is an E, capital letter. Now I'm going to draw notes that go down lower than E, and they go really, really low. So clarinets and trumpets especially, you guys are going to learn how to read some really low notes on your staff. So let's draw the next one. I'm going to draw right below that line, like that. The top of the note is touching the top line. That's going to be known as a D. Easy. Next, I'm going to draw an extra line like this. It's kind of like I'm drawing an extra line to the staff. So we have 5 lines up here, but I'm going to add a small part of a 6th line right here, and then I'm going to draw a note that is right on, a note that's right on that line. Since I'm going down, I'm going to go backwards. So if I know that's D, this is going to be a C. And then I'm going to go a little bit, I'm going to go one more below that. And if you figure that right before C in the alphabet is B. Let's draw a separation line right here. And now we're going to go up higher. A lot of times flutes and clarinets are going to learn how to play higher notes that go above the staff. So we're going to add ledger lines. This right here, that line that we drew is called a ledger line. L-E-D-G-E-R, and then line. Let's do the same thing. We're going to start on the top line of the staff and then work our way up. So top line of the treble clef staff is F. And you can look up on the top of your page so you see that. And let's label a few notes above that. On top of the top line, so the bottom of the note is touching that top line, draw a ledger line, like a ledge. Draw a circle on top of that. And let's do one more. Draw a ledger line. And one more note on top of that. Now, I went lower and backwards in the alphabet. Now I'm going higher, and I'm going to go forward in the alphabet. G, A, B. Remember, I don't use H. G, all the way back to A, like we talked about earlier. Let's do the same thing for bass clef. New line. And bass clef. Just go ahead and draw that in. Get your dots really, really precise. Now for bass clef, okay, we're going to do the same thing. Let's go ahead and label the bottom line of bass clef. We're going to draw a circle on the bottom line. And we're going to label that as the note we did earlier. So if we look back here or back to Grizzly, we know that's a G. And then I'm going to go lower. I'm going to draw these same exact notes, but the letters are going to be different. Pause the video if you need to catch up. I'm going down, I'm going lower, so I'm going to go backwards in the alphabet, which means F, E, and then D. This is only for bass clef. These letters right here are not the same as those. Remember, they're never going to line up, and that's why we have to have two staffs. Let's go ahead and do the notes that are high. So label the top line, and then label the 3 notes above that, just like we did in treble clef. So we know that the top line in bass clef from earlier is an A, or we can look here to grizzly bears don't fly airplanes, A. I'm going higher, which means I'm going to go forward in the alphabet. Hopefully you remember the first 4 letters of the alphabet. Now let's write ourselves a little reminder so that we know if we're going up. So we'll write pitches go up equals forward in alphabet. So pitches are like the different notes that we play. We label them with letters in music so we can kind of communicate together. Opposite of that, pitches go down equals backwards in alphabet. If you're ever confused about how to read the notes, here are all the answers. Pretty much every single note you're going to play in 6th grade band is now labeled on this page. It's really not difficult. There's a lot of rhyme and reason into why this is the way it is. A, B, C, D, E, F, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, and then I'm going to keep going. A, B, C, D, right? This A, B, C, D. It's going to continue the alphabet up and down, up and down. Now, let's go ahead and flip over to the back if you haven't done so already. I've got another side there, and we're going to talk about some pitch alterations that we do. So let's draw a treble clef first, just so we're kind of alternating. Hopefully you're a pro at drawing treble clefs. Mine are looking better at this point. And we're going to draw 4 Gs. Put some space in between the Gs because we're going to write some stuff in between them. Make sure your Gs are definitely on the line, that we can tell they're on the line. First one we're going to label as a G. And then next I'm going to go ahead and label some different symbols on the notes. So I'm going to draw a flat sign. A flat sign kind of looks like a smushed lowercase b. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw that flat sign right next to this note. It's going to go to the left of the note. And we're going to label that note as G flat. Now, this is confusing, so remember this. When I'm reading music, I'm always going to read left to right. I'm going to see the flat before the note to tell me the next note is flat. But when we're communicating verbally what the note is, we're going to say G flat. When we read it in music, we're going to think flat, next note is G. When we say it, what note is that? It's a G flat. So the flat's kind of on opposite ends of the names or the note. The next symbol we're going to learn to draw is going to be a sharp, and this is a hashtag symbol. And that in music we call a sharp. We're going to draw that right next to the next one. And you'll notice the very, very center of that box in the middle is on the line, which is what we want to do when we draw a sharp sign. And that is going to be called a G sharp. The last type of accidental that we're going to see most commonly in music is called a natural Kind of looks like a hurricane symbol or an L plus a 7. And we call that a natural. A flat lowers the pitch. Make sure you're writing this in too. Flat is going to lower pitch by a half step. A flat is going to lower the pitch by a half step. A sharp is going to raise the pitch. Lights just turned off. There we go. It's going to raise the pitch by 1/2 step. You think of sharp as something that points, like some pointy object is usually pointing up. Something, if you're flattening something against the ground, you're smashing into the ground, you're pushing it down. So flatten it down, sharp pointing up. That might be a good way to help you memorize it. And natural is going to cancel. So cancel or cancels a flat or sharp. So the last symbol, let's draw that next to the last G we have is the natural sign. So an L plus a 7. And we're going to call it G natural. This note and this note are the same. So sometimes I'm just going to label it as a regular G, but if I need to cancel out one of those, like this came before it, I'm going to cancel that out and make it a regular G again, but we're going to call it a G natural. So it's back to kind of its normal position. Let's do some of the same stuff for bass clef. So halfway through that staff, label a bass clef. And we're going to draw a note that's going to be in the middle, on the middle line. So right here, draw 4 of those with some space in between them. This note, if we remember from earlier, the first note that we labeled on the back of the page was the very, very center of the bass clef. So either here or here, whichever way you're looking. Okay, the center line was this one right here. Don't. So we're going to label that as D. Then we just did the same thing in treble clef. We labeled flat, sharp, natural. Let's do the same thing here. Flat, sharp, natural. So flat sign, and we're going to call it a D flat. Sharp sign, D sharp. Natural sign, D natural. When it comes time to playing our instruments, when we see a D versus a D flat or a G sharp versus a G flat, we have to play them differently. A lot of times we're going to change our fingering or slide position to play 2 different types of notes. But we'll learn that as we kind of go. Let's label this line right here that we just did as accidentals. Accidentals are the flats, the sharps, the naturals. They alter the pitch of the note. So this first one we called it was just a G, and then we alter the G to make it a G flat or a G sharp or a G natural. Same thing with the Ds that we did in bass clef. All right, easy stuff. We're gonna do one more thing. This is gonna be some rhythms that we label. So we're not gonna put a clef here. We're just gonna draw some symbols. So a lot of what we've been drawing so far is known as a whole note, And we're going to draw, let's draw it on the middle line. That is known as a whole, with a W, note. Okay? Now in music we have something called a whole note. We also have something called a whole rest. And they look much different. The notes are always going to have a circular shape. The rests are not. So a whole rest is kind of going to look like a hole in the ground. Watch how I draw this. So I'm going to go to the fourth line, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to draw below that line a box like that, and then I'm just going to shade it in. And that is a whole rest. A whole rest means don't play, or any rest is like take a break and don't play. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to put your instrument down, but it's a kind of give your mouth a break from playing for a second. Now we're going to go ahead and draw the next fastest note, which is called a half note. And we're going to draw two of them. So one, we're going to label it kind of like a whole note, and we're going to label it on the second line. So right now it's a whole note. In order to make it a half note, we're going to draw a little bit more. We're going to add what's called a stem to it. So the stem is the line that we draw next to it. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw another whole note to start with on the fourth line. So second line and then the fourth line. This time the stem is going to go down. Sometimes in music, you don't have to draw this, but when I get to this line right here, the center line, it looks a little bit cleaner if I start to move the note head, the stem upside down, so that when I get way up here, this looks really ugly. I can't really tell what note that is. If I draw that instead, it's easier to read. People are more used to reading it that way. Okay? You don't have to draw those. These are called half notes. And you can kind of tell by the title that they are half of a whole note. Now, draw a bar line. We also have something called a half rest in music, just like we do with a whole note. We have a whole note, whole rest. We have a half note and a half rest. A half rest is going to kind of look like a hat on top of one of the lines. So right on top of the third line, draw that little half rectangle that we did, and then just shade it in. Let's draw another one of those. Half rests. And then a bar line. Now, when we go faster, we're going to draw more. So it's going to take a little bit more ink or a little bit more lead. The next type of note is going to be what's called a quarter note. And we're going to draw 4 of these. Let's go ahead and draw these on the spaces. So first space, remember we don't have a clef, so we can't really tell what note we're doing. We're going to draw the circle, but we're going to color it in like that. Stem goes up. Draw one on the second space. Stem goes up. Third space. Stem goes down. We just got to the halfway point, so we turn around. Stem on the fourth space. Note head on the fourth space. Stem goes down. Bar line. And these are called quarter notes. Now, this is a lot of information, but the cool thing is we're going to see all of these, and when you go to see it in your music, you're going to kind of already know what they are because we've drawn it. If you can draw it a lot of times, reading it is so much easier, so much easier. Now, we have whole note, whole rest, half notes, half rests, quarter notes, quarter rests. Quarter rests are a little bit trickier to draw, and they look a lot different. They're not really rectangular. So I'm going to draw one for you. Kind of watch my pencil as I do this. So let's try one of those together. So you're gonna kind of go to the right, zigzag, almost you're making like a Harry Potter lightning bolt. Let's draw 4 of those. So away from the staff, it kind of looks like this. It's curved at the bottom, so it's kind of zigzag, curve. And let's finish with a double bar line. When we see a double bar line in music, it means the end. Double bar line. That's going to tell us that we're at the end of the music. Okay, there's nothing that comes after that. Cool. So now we know how to read music, and we'll get started with how to apply that to playing our instruments, okay? Nice job. Before you go, you're gonna give this back to the substitute. So name at the top, class period 6A or 6B. 6A is the first elective class, 6B is the last class, the brass class right there. Nice work.